Um, so the Gemara that we've been learning, so we learned this complicated calculations. These well, it's not so complicated, but some mathematical calculations of the size of the lulav, and this had to do with the statement that it says Reb Tarfon had said this calculation of an amma bas chamisha tfachim, and we're talking about hadas and arava, and we're talking about lulav and the size of them. And the first opinion in the brisa was that the size is well, the size of them is basically three handbreadths, which we know to be somewhere around 9.5 inches or so. And lulav is four handbreadths, so four handbreadths is somewhere around 12.5 inches or so. And the Tarfon comes along and says this strange thing about an amma bas chamisha tfachim, about an amma that's 5 handbreadths. First of all, an amma normally is 6 handbreadths, but there are some times that we calculate an amma 5 handbreadths. But what is he referring to? He's talking about the hadas, the arava. So the Gemara initially understands it that he's saying that you need to have a hadas and arava, myrtle, and you need to have the willows and the myrtles. They have to be like a full amma. Okay, not a 6 handbreadth amma, 5 handbreadth amma, but still. And the Gemara says that Rava said this is like impossible to get. You're not going to be able to get such a thing. We don't have these things growing so easily. Even to get 3 is very hard. 5 is like impossible. So 5 handbreadths, 5, that would be like impossible. So then first the Gemara wanted to say, maybe he means that he doesn't mean exactly that you need a full amma. It means to somehow do some type of calculation with an amma that's 5 handbreadths. In other words, you take an amma that's 6 handbreadths and divide it into 5 parts, and there you have 3 of those handbreadths. So each amma is a little bigger than each handbreadth is a little bigger than a regular handbreadth. That was it ends up being 3 3/5. That would be the according to him. In other words, it's 3 handbreadths is what the official rule is, but 3 handbreadths, what size handbreadths? So he has a way of making a handbreadth a little bigger than a handbreadth. It ends up being 3 1/5. So I'm sorry, each handbreadth is in 1 1/5 handbreadth. So if you have 3 of them, so it's 3 3/5 handbreadth. And that was the calculation that Rav Dimi wanted to say, that maybe that's the meaning of Rav Tarfon. So it's not that much bigger than than the regular view. In other words, it's not 5 handbreadths that's going to be impossible to find. It's a little bigger than 3 3/5. Okay, the Gemara doesn't like that, and the reason why the Gemara doesn't like that is because we have a contradiction, because Shmuel at one place says that the halacha follows this whole thing with Reb Tarfon. The 3 would end up meaning 3 3/5 of a handbreadths for the myrtles and the willows. And the other statement of Shmuel, the same guy says another statement where he says, same rabbi says 3 handbreadths. He doesn't say 3 3/5. So it would be a contradiction to learn this way, because one place he said, so the Gemara says, yeah, but sometimes people do round off the numbers, so maybe it's not a contradiction. He rounded off the numbers. And Gemara says, no, you can't round off numbers if you're going to be doing something lenient. You got to round off the numbers to on the more strict side, on the more to fulfill the mitzvah. If you round it off to the lenient side, instead of saying 3 3/5, that has to be 3 3/5 handbreadths. Instead, you're going to say that it means he said 3. He's just going to say 3, and he's not going to verbalize that it's 3 3/5. People are going to end up not fulfilling the mitzvah. So therefore, the Gemara cannot accept this understanding of Reb Tarfon. It can't be. You can't say Shmuel one place says 3, but really the halacha is 3 3/5. So the Gemara comes up with sort of like the opposite understanding, that Ravin came and he says it's really an amma that's a 5 handbreadth amma. You divide that into 6, which makes each tefach, each handbreadth, a little smaller than a tefach. And it ends up that that a tefach is the 3 tefachs are 2.5, are really 2.5 tefachs. So we just calculate that in a calculator. 2.5 divided by 3 is should know this probably. 2.5 divided by 3 equals 0.8333. So it's so each hand breath is really 0.833 of a hand breath. So it's a little less than a hand breath. And what ends up happening is if you put them if you put 3 of those hand breaths together, you end up with 2.5. And so the contradiction that we had before, where Shmuel paskins, he says that's the halacha, that really the hadassim and aravos only need to be 2.5 hand breaths, and it's because he says the halacha follows Reb Tarfon. And in another place, Shmuel says the halacha is that they need to be 3. And what's the answer to this contradiction? The answer is Shmuel just rounded off the number. Instead of saying 2.5, he said 3. Can you round off? Can you round it off? Yeah, because he's being more strict. So someone's going to go and get 3 hand breath size myrtles and 3 hand breath size willows. He's at least he's for sure fulfilling the mitzvah. Even 2.5 would be good enough. So when Shmuel was just talking, he said 3. When Shmuel was mentioning about the hadassim, the aravas, hadassim have to be 3. So he didn't go into the detail that it could be really 2.5. He just said 3 hand breaths, and when even and so he rounded it off in a way that's more strict, not in a way that's more lenient. So therefore, if someone doesn't really know the specifics, he'll get 3 hand breath hadassim, 3 hand breath aravas. Okay, won't be, and that's no problem. It won't do anything wrong. So he was loy duck. He was not so precise in his wording, but he did it in a way of a chumrah. Now, I do want to mention, people aren't aware of this, but this is brought in halacha. This concept of the measure, this is in chapter 650 in the Shulchan Aruch, and it says the measurement of hadas and arava. This is in Rabbi Yosef Cairo and the Ramah, Moshe Isserlis. So the regular Shulchan Aruch. So in chapter 650. Now it says the measurement for hadas arava is 3 hand breaths. The spine of the lulav is 4 hand breaths, in order that the spine goes 1 hand breath more than the hadassim and aravos, than the myrtles and the willow. And these amas are really 5 hand breath amas that you divide into 6, and you remove. So now you have 3 of these, which ends up being 2.5 hand breaths, which the calculation, one of the ways of calculating that is how many thumbs. Yud goydlim, 10 thumbs, because the regular person has 4, a regular size thumb. There are 4 of them in the width of the thumb. So if you do 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be the size of a hand breath. Now, if you need 3 of those, how many thumbs should it be? It should be 12. But really, according to Reb Tarfon, it doesn't mean a regular tefach. It's a smaller tefach. We're using a smaller tefach. So it's not 4 thumbs. It's a little less than 4 thumbs. And if it's a little less than 4 thumbs, so it ends up, instead of being 12 thumbs for the size of a hadassim and aravos, it ends up being 10 goydlim. In the shidra of the lulav, how much is the spine of a lulav? If the hadassim and aravos are 10 thumbs, so how much is the lulav? It's got to be another close to 4, but a little less than 4. So how much is it? So the measurement of the spine of the lulav is 13 goydlim, ushlish, and a third. 13 goidlim, 13 of these 13 thumbs, and a third. So that is the measurement of the new type of tefach that we're talking about here, this smaller tefach. Instead of being an extra 4 goidlim, which would make it 14 thumbs, it's not. It's only 3 and a third. Good gimel goidlim with shlish goidel in it. Okay, so that's the size of the lulav. Now the yesh misha omer, and some say that the measurement of the lulav is really yud daled goidlim, is really 14 thumbs. So what that means is that even though the hadassim and aravos we can measure with a smaller hand breadth, but there's opinions that say that the lulav you don't measure with smaller hand breadths. How much do you measure, or the extra hand breadth of the lulav that has to extend? That is a regular tefach. The first 3 hand breadths we can follow the small measurement of how big a hand breadth is, and for the extra hand breadth that the lulav has to extend, that you need a regular hand breadth size, and that would be 4 goidlim, 4 thumbs, which would make it 14 thumbs altogether, the size of the spine of the lulav. And then in Shulchan Aruch it says v'yesh oimrim, and some say that the shear of the hadas and arava, the measurement of the hadas and arava, are 12 goidlim, 12 thumbs. Now, what does that mean? That this final view is that you need the regular size tefach, the regular size hand breadth is 4 thumbs. And so if you need 3 hand breadths, the myrtle has to be 3 hand breadths, the arava, the willow, has to be 3 hand breadths. That would mean that it has to be 12 widths of the 12 thumb widths, and that would be that's yud beis goidlim, and the lulav would have to be 4 tefachim, regular size, which would be 4 times 4 would be 16, and 16 goidlim. And the Ramah adds in v'chein noyhagim lechatchila, and that is how we initially try to fulfill it. So when you go looking for your buying your hadassim and aravai, so you're going to trim them, make sure to trim them lechatchila. The preferable way is that we should follow the regular size tefach. But in the Shulchan Aruch, it does seem very clear that there's a solid support for a tefach in these cases to be a smaller size tefach. And in a case of b'diavad, in a case where you already did the mitzvah, you don't have extras, or so, and then Mishnah Berurah brings down b'diavad, the lulav is enough with 13 and a third, the hadas and arava 10 thumb widths, and
to trim them from the bottom, not the top.
Yeah, trim them from the bottom. Thank you, David. Saving the day. So that is this is seemingly a solid, acceptable view in halacha in a case where you don't have another option. It seems to be very solid. There doesn't seem to be any discussion if you could make a bracha on it. It seems very acceptable to make a bracha, and maybe like that's even the main halacha is just we try to be machmir, we try to be strict to follow the other view lechatchila. But it just shows us that there is this concept of the mini size tefach that the Gemara says, and that is an acceptable view in halacha in a case of b'diavad, in a case where you already did it, or in a case of need, that is acceptable. And so that's this opinion of Ravin, that really a hand breadth is really a little less than a hand breadth. In decimals it was 0.833, and it's so it ends up being and in thumb widths the hand breadth seems to be 3 1/3 thumbs. 3 1/3 thumbs. So right, because if you have 3 hand breadths, 3 1/3 times 3 would be 10, right? 3.333 would be times 2 would be 10. So that's the size of in thumb lengths. There is this is the calculation. 10 thumb widths would be the size of the hadassim and arabis. Okay, so so that was the end of that little piece of Gemara. And then the Gemara started getting into the Hadassim Mishnah. We did the Mishnah, Hadassim and Arabis. Now, I did want to just mention one thing on the previous Mishnah and Gemara. So we concluded that the lulav really is not sufficient to have 3 hand breadths. It really needs 4 hand breadths. And what was the reason for that? The reason for that seemed to be that there needs to be an extra hand breadth of the lulav, that it extends from above the hadassim and arabais. And the way it seems in Shulchan Aruch is that it follows the view that the spine has to be the extra hand breadth, not just the lulav, but the spine of the lulav needs to be an extra hand breadth. And the reason is kadei lananei, in order to shake it. What does that mean, in order to shake it? That you need an extra hand breadth. You could shake it either way. Why do you need an extra hand breadth to shake it? So I did see in the Ritva that he explains that the halacha of shaking the lulav, he talks about it really later on in the Masechta, in this chapter, later on in the chapter. He talks about the concept of the wavings, the na'anuim. And he says that, is it enough to just wave it? You take the lulav, you go into this direction, go back, this direction and back, or do you have to give it a shake? And he says that this Mishnah proves that it must mean that you have to actually shake it. You can't just go in the direction, the right direction, you go to the right, to the left, up, and just wave it, but it actually needs to also have a shake. He says there's other opinions, but he says you have to be meilech umevi maila umayrid. You wave the lulav forward and backward, up and down. He says some of the Goinim wrote that this is the nanuim, this is the wavings that it mentions, that you go up and down, you go forward and backward, and that's it. And you don't need to do a shake. You do a wave. A wave is good, and you don't. And that's what he brings from the Re Ben Gaius, and he said they bring in that this is the opinion of the Baal HaItur. But he says, and this is not right, the Ritva writes, because if so, why do you need the lulav to go out of the hadassim and extend an extra hand breadth in order to wave it? If you're waving it, wherever you go, it's being waved, even if it's the same size. Wherever, if you're waving it, it's going to be waved. If you need to shake it, it must be that you need to shake the lulav and have the leaves rustle. You have to have the leaves rustle against each other. So you need that extra hand breath in order to have that. And so he says when you wave it, then you should give it a shake. Litraif gufay shalulav. It's at the same time when you're doing the wavings, you're moving it back and forth. You wave it, and give it a shake, and then back. So that's when you're doing the yesh. When you're being meilech or maybe milo myrid, you're going forward and backward, up and down. That's when you should be yesh lenanei litraif gufay shalulav. Then you're supposed to be giving the shake. And he says, what does it mean exactly while you're actually waving it or after you finish the waving? So he talks a little about that. But this is really a topic later, but it does give us an understanding, at least according to the Ritva, and they bring that the Ran also holds this way, that the lulav does need to have a rustle. That in other words, that the mitzvah is really for it to you have to do this a shake. Now the other opinions obviously don't hold of this, and interestingly enough, it seems that in Chabad we're not makbid to have the leaves rustle. But it is brought in the Ritva and the Ran. There seems to be a source for it in Shulchan Aruch. It does seem to the Ramah seems to mention it in chapter of 651. He does seem to mention it. In other words, when you buy the lulav, so the way in Lubavitch you buy the lulav is you want a very tight lulav that doesn't even have a rustle of leaves. It's so tight, and the benefit of that is that it stays together much better. But the problem with that is that you're not fulfilling the mitzvah according to the Ritva and the Ran in the best way, that it's supposed to, the leaves should shake, that the leaves should rustle. So some people, it seems that the other minhagim, the other views are that you buy a lulav that does have more of a rustle to it. So in the I did see in the Shulchan Aruch here, it says the na'anua, the waving, is that you bring it, you bring it to mikenegdoi v'hala, from in front of you and further on, and v'yananei you shake it there 3 times with haylacha hava, 3 times going, 3 times coming. So you move it away from you and shake it there 3 times going, 3 times backwards. The Ramah adds in toiref halulav umachasches ha'olin b'chol na'anua. You shake the lulav and you cause the leaves to rustle. You shake the leaves in every na'anua, every wave. So every wave includes, and he says Ran Perik Lulav Hagazel. This is the Ran's view. So it seems that the Ramah understands the Shulchan Aruch, that is the Na'anua and Vienna Neasham, and the Ramah definitely himself holds that Toirav Halulav Machastes. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, the Chabad minhag to use 5 rings on the lulav, but that cuts down on the rustling, and then on Hoshana Rabbah, when you remove the top 2 rings, it's noticeable that you get more rustling then.
Well, the reason you get more rustling then is because it's also a week later, so the lulav's been shuckled and banged up enough. So it slowly starts separating. The question is, the question is, like, why in Lubavitch are we not so careful? Like, I'm pretty convinced that in Lubavitch we don't care if it rustles at all. Like we seem to hold not like the Ritva, and a very tight lulav, I think, is the accepted minhag in Lubavitch, because the Alter Rebbe in this same chapter, I didn't see him bring this point about what the way I have to look at it again, but I didn't see it brought down that it has to have that rustle like the Ramah writes. So it doesn't seem to. He doesn't seem to bring it. It's in the regular Shulchan Aruch, and the Alter Rebbe wrote his Shulchan Aruch as to include the later Poskim's views. For the next 100, 200 years, 300 years after the Shulchan Aruch came into print, the Alter Rebbe tried to include. So he based it all on the previous Shulchan Aruch and just added in the later Poskim in the way his final psak, his final view. Seemed to mention about the about the wavings. Again, I'll have to learn it one more time, make sure I didn't miss it. But it could be that's why we're not so makbid. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we do have maybe the little we just hold it could be a drop, a tiny drop way shake is good enough. No, we shake it, but is that the leaves don't really rustle, or is it the maybe slightly they rustle? That's good, or maybe we're just we suffice with a tiny little rustle that it's almost impossible for a lulav not to rustle, maybe a drop. Maybe that's what we rely on, that we're fulfilling the ritva maybe in a slight way. Uh, that whatever when you shake it, it rustles a little, or maybe not. Maybe we hold that you don't need it to rustle at all. Again, I'll have to look into the Shulchan Aruch again, but that's the just sharing with you the minhag in Lubavitch seems to be something along those lines, is it that it doesn't need to rustle. But the understanding of the ritva gives us a little understanding of the meaning of this law. Like it's always a question to me. What does that mean? You need the lulav needs to be extra tall so that it could shake. I mean, what does that mean to be extra tall? But here it's because you want the leaves to rustle. If it's all covered, if it's all closed up with the hadassim and aravos around it, and you don't see the leaves rustling, that's a problem. It knows it's meant to see. You're supposed to see the leaves rustle. So by having it extend further up, it makes the rustle more visible.
It's all in the wrist.
In the rest or the wrist?
In the wrist. In the wrist.
In the wrist. Uh-huh. I mean, if you have a very tight lulav, it's not, I don't know how much it really rustles. But anyway, so that's the mission. Now,
Think of it,
how do the
Rabbi,
other
hold your hands in front of you and give
Yeah.
it a good shake with your wrist. Any lulav would rustle, no question.
I don't know. They're quite tight, those lulav when you buy them.
If you're looking for tight.
But okay. So how do the other opinions learn that you what does it mean kedela na neaboy? I guess what it means is that kedela na neaboy, that you should see that it's being waved. In other words, if the hadassim and aravos are surrounding the lulav, so you don't really see the lulav being waved. So kedela na neaboy means that it's in order that you should be able to see it being waved. Now, it's not in order that it should be visible, the rustling, but it's at least that the lulav you should see the lulav waved. And if the shedra is the main part of the lulav, the spine, so you need to see part of the spine. It has to extend, otherwise it's somewhat covered over. But when it extends, you see that the lulav is being waved. So that's I guess how they learn. Okay, so now we're up to the Mishnah, and the Mishnah talked about the hadas. So the Mishnah says that the hadas hagozol v'hayobesh, the stolen hadas, the dried out hadas, these are puzzle, these are invalid. Then the Mishnah says the ashedo hadas, the ir hanidachas hadas, these are also invalid. Avodah Zarah and so on. We'll have to see what the Gemara says, but from our experience, from our knowledge of the previous Gemara, we sort of have an understanding that we learned about the lulav that's an asherah lulav, or the lulav that's an irani dachas lulav, and we understood that the issue is that there is no shear, it doesn't have a measure, it's supposed to be burned, and that would be the same halacha seemingly would apply to the myrtle, to the hadas, the myrtle. So these are the a few cases where the hadas would not be kosher, and the next case is niktam roishai. Niktam roishai, our Mishnah says that it's also invalid. It says if the top is clipped, it's invalid. Nifritzu, again, we're on 32b over here in the Mishnah. I'm just going over for what we did yesterday, and it says if the top is clipped, or if the leaves are nifratsu, they have fallen off. The way Rashi learns, they fell off, and the other thing is, or there are grapes that are growing. In other words, some type of berry that's growing that's more than the amount of leaves. It's also invalid. Now, the thing is, it does seem a little surprising to us because we know the halacha. Many of you probably are aware that the halacha is that we generally follow that the understanding that the top of the hadassim, if they're clipped off, it's kosher. And the reason behind it, at least this is from years of experience, we generally assume that it's kosher, even though it's not often that it happens, but because the leaves cover over the stem, so you don't really see it. So it doesn't really ruin the beauty of the hadassim. Hadassim are a beautiful branch, myrtle branch, and the top of it you don't really see because the leaves cover over that top. So even that top, when it's clipped, generally there's like some leniency that it's kosher. But here our Mishnah says it's not kosher, and so the thing is that you have to stay tuned. It is going to talk about it later, the other opinion. So even though here it says that it's invalid, don't be surprised. We'll see later that the other view that it is kosher. Now, then the Mishnah mentions that about removing the berries from the hadassim. You could do that, and you could kosher it. You could make it hadar, make it beautiful by simply removing the berries. But the thing is, you can't do it on Yom Tov because then it's considered like a tikkun kli. You're fixing something, and you're not allowed to fix on Yom Tov, and therefore there's reason it might be considered, or it could either be a shvus, like a rabbinic law, or it might be even biblical. There's a discussion in the commentaries, but basically you can't fix it on Yom Tov, and therefore it would be invalid until after Yom Tov. There is a discussion also if you did fix it on Yom Tov, would it be a mitzvah b'avera? Would you be eligible to use it if it was done with in a prohibited way? Would that be a problem? But we'll talk about it. So the Gemara said that how do we know that the hadassim are the myrtles? So the pasuk says anaf eitz avos, anaf eitz avos. So the Gemara says enough of chayfin es eitzoi. The leaves cover the stem. What is a case where leaves cover the stem? And truth is, the hadassim are a beautiful branch that the leaves cover the entire stem. That's a hadas. So it makes sense. Anaf eitz avos, that the anaf is anaf eitz, that it covers the way the Gemara understands it. That's what the Torah is hinting to, that it's referring to this myrtle. The Gemara says, what do you mean? There's also the olive branch also does that. So the Gemara answers, the olive branch, it has long leaves, and they grow on top of each other. They grow. There's a lot, so they end up covering. So the Gemara answers, yeah, but it needs to be be'inan avos. Needs to be in a way that it's like braided, and like a chain. It has to be like a chain, and the olive tree don't have that. It has to be like that one is relying on the next one, that each line is resting on the group, the group that's under it, and that you don't have by the olive tree. Of course, this would be a lot easier if we had pictures of branches in front of us. I mean, we know what the hadassim are like, but I don't know exactly how the olive branch is. But we trust the Gemara, and some of you maybe are more familiar with the trees. But anyway, that's what the Gemara says, that it then it's not like a chain. The Gemara says maybe a chestnut. At least the way Rashi learns. The Teves doesn't seem to agree with this. Doesn't want to say that thinks that that's not the case, because he says the chestnut isn't, doesn't have this braid that Rashi learns that's the Gemara's question. Maybe a chestnut, um, it has this chain. It looks like a chain. So the Gemara answers, you need to have enough of chayfin eseitzai. But in addition to having the chain, you also have to have that the leaves cover the stem, and you don't have that with the chestnut. And there's like a difference. There's a separation between there's separations between the rows, and because there's separations between the rows, it doesn't cover it enough, and therefore it's not good enough. The commentaries do discuss when you have a hadas. So the hadassim, the way it grows is that you have 3 leaves on every little every joint of the hadas, every I don't know what you would call it. We'll call it every joint. Every joint of the hadas, it has numerous joints, and there are 3 leaves that come out of it. And each of the 3 leaves, they cover the leaf on top of it. But here, and the Gemara explains that the idea of the hadas is that it has to cover the stem. So the question is, what would happen if you have a hadas and that part of it is not covering the stem, that you do have some spaces in the hadas? Would that mean that it's invalid, just like the dulva, just like this chestnut branch? That's invalid because it's enough of the leaves are not covering the eitzai, the stem. Or do we say that it's not about this specific hadas? We're talking about the general family of myrtle. The myrtle family, the myrtle tree is a tree that has branches that do this, but not that. So you have a hadassim, you have some myrtles that don't have that exact feature, that is not perfect throughout the myrtle branch. It's not going to ruin it. It's just that this is what the tree means. It's a tree that has that. So that's a discussion in the commentaries. They talk about this, that what would happen if it's not covering the eitzai, because the Gemara seems to make a big deal out of it. In fact, the pasuk says anaf eitz avos, and we're darshaning that the pasuk means that it has to be anaf of chayfin eitzai. The Brisa says that this is what it means, that anaf of chayfin eitzai. So that would be a question: what would happen if it doesn't have that? Now, the Gemara then says that maybe it means hirdof. Hirdof. It's interesting. The Gemara, the Rashi says, so Abai says that you can't use hirdof because the ways of Hashem are ways of pleasantness, and because the ways of pleasantness, and the hirdof is a problem because it's sharp, and you'll end up getting scrapes and cuts, and therefore it can't be that the Torah would want us to take this hirduf, which is some type of a bush, I guess, that grows by the water. Anyway, it says similar as flowers similar to a rose. Anyway, bottom line is it's sharp, and Abai says that it can't be that that's what the Torah would have wanted us to take. Rava says that it can't be what the Torah would have wanted us to take, is because the ways of Hashem are truth and peace. And this type of a bush, these type of branches, they are a sam hamaves. They are poisonous. And at least the way Teves mentions this idea of poisonous, he says that it means for animals. It's poisonous for animals, and therefore it would be you can't be that the Torah would have wanted us to use it. So interesting that Rashi, the Gemara doesn't say anything about if it's poisonous or it's painful. The Gemara just says Hashem's ways are peace, and Hashem's ways are truth and pleasant. The Gemara doesn't really say about the poison. It doesn't say about the prickling and the scraping. So what's interesting is that Rashi switches his shot from Abaye to Rava. Abaye, he says the reason is because the prickliness, and Rava, he says the reason must be something different. Why can't it be the same? The prickly in Hashem's ways are truth and peace. It's not peaceful to have prickly. Why can't Rashi learn both the same shot? No, the commentaries mention this idea that the problem is that if you remember in the previous Gemara, we had a lulav. The Gemara had asked, maybe it means a very young lulav. The Gemara says it can't mean the shoots of a lulav, young, very young shoots, because there it's prickly. And the prickly, the Gemara says, Hashem's ways are ways of peace. Now, over there, Rava didn't say, over there, the Rava didn't have his statement. Only here by Hadassim, when the Gemara asks we should use hirduf, here the Gemara says, emes v'hashalom evu. So here here the Gemara brings this new reason, this new point. Rava says it only here, it doesn't say it over there. So it must be that Rava didn't agree with the Deracha Darchi Nayam concept, that causing someone to have a little some cuts. Instead, Rava must hold like from a different perspective. It has to be a different problem. So here, there's a different problem. He says, Rava says his halacha that emes v'shalom elvu, that it's a problem of poison, and poison is death. It's against the it's not called peace. It's not truth. So death is a problem, and that would be against this, and therefore Rashi seems to give this reason. Because Hashem's name is truth and emes, and Hashem wouldn't want to put his name that on for a mitzvah that we would have to use, that would be something negative. Okay, so the next Gemara, we're up to Tanu Rabbanan. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa. We're all the way at the bottom of the page. Towards the bottom of the page. Tanu Rabbanan, what is it, 10 lines from the bottom? Tanu Rabbanan, Kalua, Kamin, Kliya. Maybe about 11 lines from the bottom. The rabbis taught in a brisa. Kalua kamin kliya. That it is, they are braided like a braid. That means that every row are lying one on top of the other. V'daima l'shal sheles, and it's similar to Kalia, the braiding means that the same row, the leaves cover each other. In Daimel Shalshelis is the group of three is resting, is riding on top of the lower group. So there's a Kalia and there's Shalshelis, and so the brisa ends off Zeu Hadas. This is Hadas. And then the brisa brings opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Eimer, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that, how do we know it's a hadas? So he says, Anaf Eitz Avos, that the branch of this is a branch that's, the leaves are plaited. What does that mean? So he says, you know what Anaf Eitz Avos means? It's eitz. It's a tree. Shatam Eitza Yopir Yoshavim. That the taste of its the eitz, the tree and the fruit is equal. Now the problem is they're not really fruits on a hadas tree. There are some berries, but they're not. Don't call them fruits. They're not edible. So on the side, they have another girsa that it's enough of. Or there's two other options. One is enough of chayfen aseitza, that the branches cover over the stem. Or another way of reading it is that that tam eitzai va'anof of shavet, not the period, but it's the actual tree and the stem of the tree and the stems that come out from the tree are equal. So there's two ways of reading this. I don't know if you have it on the side of your Gemara, but I have it on the side of mine. It's a little aleph, and it tells you that these two other ways of reading this, seemingly because there isn't really fruits from a hadas tree. So bottom line is that Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov has these understanding that it has to be a hadas, either because it's tam eitzai va'anof of shavet, the trunk and the branches are the same, the stems are the same flavor, and or the other way is that enough of chayfen as eitzai, that the leaves cover over the stem. The Gemara says that Tana was taught in a brisa, eitz avos, that if the leaves are resting, they're riding on each other, kosher, it is kosher. She'ena yavos pasul, if it's not, then it's invalid. Now, the Gemara says, heichi dami avos. So what does that mean? Avos, that they're braided. Rabbi Yehuda v'hu kaimi tlasa tarpi bekino, that there are three on every little joint. There must be some other term for instead of the word joint, but I don't know what to use, so I'm calling it a joint. Every joint of this branch has three juncture. Thank you. Has three. So it's 3, 3, 3. Every juncture, it's going to have 3 throughout the entire length of the branch. Rav Kahana Amar afilu trei v'chad. Rav Kahana says that even if you don't have 3, but you have 2 at one juncture, and the juncture that's right under it has 1 that lies on top of the ones above it, that's also good. So Rav Acha berei de Rava mahader atrei v'chad. Rav Acha, the son of Rava, he would be mahader. He would try to find hadassim that have it like Rav Kahana had it. That you have the 2 with 1 juncture, and 1 is maybe below it, but it's but the leaf goes into the other 2, goes up to the where the other 2 are, and like Rav Kahana had it. Why would he do that? Why would he try to get this? Rav Kahana said, even this is also kosher. Rav Acha says, you know what? Rav Acha goes and tries to find it. Says, I want to use those. What do you mean you want to use those? Use a regular one. Use one that's 100% kosher, not one that's Rav Kahana okays. The other rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda, doesn't okay it, and only Rav Kahana okays it. So Rav Acha went to try to get Rav Kahana's case that he okayed. Why would you go after that? So it says, Hoyel v'nafik mipumei de Rav Kahana, since it went out from his mouth that this is kosher, he wanted to use this. He wanted to specifically use such a hadas. Definitely seems a little surprising. If you have something 100% kosher, you're going to go try to get something that's questionable, and only one rabbi says it's good. You want to go specifically. Why do you do that? Amar le mar bar Amemar, Ravashi, Mar bar Amemar, the master, the son of Amemar, told Ravashi, Abba, my father, means Amemar, lahahu, to that hadas, that is 2 in 1, it's not 3 at the same place. So to such a hadas, he says hadas shoita karile. We call that a foolish hadas. It's not kosher to fulfill the mitzvah. So there's definitely a debate over here if it's kosher or not. We see Rav Kahana and Rav Acha, Rava wanted that they used it, but the other opinions don't seem to think that it's acceptable, and it's called a Hadas Shaita. Why is it called a Shaita? It's called a Shaita because it's not. It doesn't think an orderly way. It's confused. It doesn't have an order to it. So therefore, it's considered a hadas shaita. They compare it to there's a person who has an older sister, and so the boy, if the person is the 2 children, let's say, and the firstborn is a girl, secondborn is a boy, so the boy is called a bachar shaita. He's a bachar, he's a firstborn male, but there really is a female before him, so he's called the bachar shaita, which means he's almost like the bachar, but he misses out, and doesn't get the inheritance and so on. So the same thing as this hadas. It looks close, but it misses out. It missed out. So it's called a hadas shaita. Anyway, so I should just mention that this concept of a hoyol v'nothing mipume de Rav Kahana is an interesting concept. That because Rav Kahana did this, it said it's kosher. The student, seems like he must have been his student, Rav Acha B'rei Rava. He specifically wanted to show that he's comfortable with it, that he's happy to use that. Rav Kahana said it's kosher. I want to do it because I want to fulfill according to Rav Kahana. It's according to my understanding. He's holy of holies, and I want to fulfill it according to him. I could get an easy way out and have a kosher one. No, I want to specifically use his because it came out of the mouth of Rav Kahana. Okay, we're gonna stop here. Sei gesund, everyone, and wonderful day. Robert, I'll see you in a little while. I might need an extra 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll be waiting.
Okay, sei gesund.
All right.